obviously, most of you use it. If you don't, you probably use dot loop and you may be jumping on because you're thinking about a switch. But either way, this is the company provided platform that we use. So you can either log in directly or you can log in through CB Desk. If you don't have a direct login, send me a message after this and I'll send you my video for how to be able to log in directly to Zipforms instead of going through Desk. So once you're here and you have a seller that's ready to sell, we're going to hit new. If you've created templates in here, you'll probably use the template. If you haven't, I'll show you what to do next. So you're going to hit new listing. I'm going to actually do a house that I sold last year just for the ease of having a specific address to use. So you always want to select residential. And then people ask about this here. So status, it doesn't mean it's going to be active in the MLS when you create it. This is just active in Zipforms, this platform. It's to help you actually stay organized in the platform. So once a transaction changes and goes pending, you can then send it to pending. And as you can see in the background here, you can have active and pending. That way you can keep your deals situated. If something falls through or goes inactive, or if it's just a prospect, you can select that as well. But I do have templates. So as you'll see, it's my agent template that comes in here. If you don't have templates set up, I do suggest doing that. But if not, you can always come in here and Trisha has set up office packets. So we're just going to use that actually. That way I can show you guys how that works. So office Camp Hill CB Realty listing packet is what we're going to select there. We're going to go ahead and hit save. It'll spin. Sometimes the circle goes away and it looks like it's not doing anything, but I promise it's loading. So once it loads, we'll move on to the next step. All right, so this is the first screen that it takes you to. I don't personally fill anything out in here. I fill it out in other parts of this platform. So what I like to always tell people, this is the summary. So once you fill things out in forms, or if you bring something in from the MLS, it will populate here. But I like to go across this blue-gray line at the top here. So we're in summary, then we go over to parties. So you always want to go here next because it'll make your life a little less complicated once you get to the document. So you should already be pulled in as yourself as the listing agent because you selected a listing packet and this is your platform. So therefore your information should already be in here, but you need to add, since this is listing, you need to add your sellers. So over here, you have many different options. Seller 1, we're going to go ahead and select that. I'll just use some random names here. And since this is going out for electronic signatures, you obviously need to have an email address. And since it's a listing, if they live there, you obviously want to put their street address in. If they live elsewhere, then use their address where they live at. So I'm actually just going to put my email addresses in here just for the ease of things. I get questions about this a lot as well. So this is your seller. Down here is signing representative. You don't fill anything out in here unless the person that owns the property can no longer sign, right? So if there's a power of attorney, if there's an LLC, right? So if somebody wants the contract in the LLC's name, the person cannot sign the LLC's name, right? That's not a valid signature. So if it's like 123 Homes LLC up here, then you would put John Smith and John's email down here, because then he'll sign John Smith and then he'll need to provide at settlement documentation that he does in fact own the LLC. This also applies if you have estates. So if you have, the estate of John Smith, John's not signing, whoever is signing, the executor would go down here in this signing section. Otherwise, if the seller is the person signing, you don't need to fill this bottom part out at all. You just fill this top part out. Once you do that, you hit save. Then we're going to go ahead and add a seller 2. One thing, so I get this question a lot. You can use the same signature or the same email, I'm sorry, for both parties. So if it's a husband and wife that share an email, you can use that same email address in here. If they have separate emails, I would suggest using that just for the sake of you don't really know if one person is signing for both of them, even though that, you know, they're in agreement and whatever. We obviously would like to have two separate emails so that we know that it's going out to two separate email addresses. I'll do myself again. Okay. So once you fill that in, you can save this to address book. You can invite them into the transaction. They won't be able to edit anything or any of that. They'll just have access to the documents. Save it to the address book, especially if this is a client that's going to be a repeat client, which we hope most of our clients are, right? So once you put them in here once, if you want to add them to a transaction, all you have to do is find them from your address book then. And you would do that up here. So if you've already had this client before and you save them to your address book, instead of having to fill everything out again, you would just go to your address book and select them if they're a repeat client. Hit save once again. All right, so now you have your two sellers in there. You have yourself in there. So now we're gonna slide over here. We're gonna go to documents. So again, this is the template that Trisha created for the office. I do want to toggle over real quick. So I pulled this up. So this is in here, or it should be in here. But it's under Coldwell Banker Forms if it's not. This CPA document checklist. This is something that the company needs all of these forms to process your transaction and to be compliant. So if you look in the first section here, seller listing side checklist, you need a consumer notice, you need a listing contract, you need a seller's disclosure signed by the seller, lead paint if it's before 78, seller's estimated cost sheet specific to the list price, our affiliate business disclosure, the FDIC wire fraud disclosure, and if there's any sort of referral agreement or commission division agreement. Those are the documents we need when you list a property, right? So these are things that you submit through My Deals. You see Angie and Jen sending out those My Deals reminders. So when you have a signed listing contract, you have all these forms signed, you need to submit your My Deals for that. But these are the forms that you need. As you'll see when we go back into the transaction, there are a bunch of other forms that you may need later on in the transaction. And while we're here, I'll just kind of show a little bit about Zipforms just for maybe anybody who's not super familiar with it, but you can actually organize these forms, right? So those forms that you absolutely need first, right? Consumer notice, listing contract, seller's property disclosure, lead paint potentially, but you can move these. So you can put that FDIC wire fraud up there. You can put the seller's estimated closing costs, and then this affiliate business disclosure. And it looks like there's two wire fraud disclosures, but this one is not a PDF, so that means it's fillable. So once you're done organizing, you can hit done organizing. But I did that because these are all of the forms. These 6 are the ones that are required, right? So just putting them in order, whatever you want to do is fine, but I prefer to keep things in order. Okay, and so I'm not searching down through here. Okay, what was that form again that I needed, right? So also a little note, something that I get questions on a lot is the seller's property disclosure, right? Because there is an option where you can have the seller fill it out when they're signing their documents. As you see, there's 2 different seller's disclosures in here. This first one is not the e-fillable one. You see the E here? So that one is electronically fillable for your seller. So if you're going to print out and take your seller a property disclosure to sign, you can actually print either one of them out. It'll look fine, even if it is the e-fillable one. But if you send them this one, they're not going to be able to fill it out, and they're just going to be able to initial and sign it, and it's going to be a blank form. So just be aware of that. You need the one that has the E here. And if you don't have that in your templates, you just come up here to all forms. The property disclosure is a PAR form. So you want to go over to PAR, sellers, property disclosure. So this one, it'll show you, you can preview the form if you want. Doesn't really make sense, but you can see that E. It doesn't show you the rest of the title of the form, but The one that has the E next to it is the electronically fillable one. Didn't mean to spend so much time on that, but I do get that question from people a lot. Like, I sent this to my seller and they said they can't fill it out. It's likely because you sent the wrong one. All right, so once we're here, next step is filling everything out, right? So because we added our parties already, they should have populated into these forms. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on the ones that we need to work on. So you can use the old form editor. I suggest using the new form editor. If you want any basics on the difference, you can watch these 2 videos right here. So open a new form editor. So when you do this, it opens a workspace. So a workspace is where you can then edit the form and you can add additional forms, right? So workspace, you can click on what's this if you're not familiar. The consumer notice is now here in your workspace, right? And as I said, it pulled in the information from the parties. So that's not the only one we want to use, right? So down here, it says grab from transaction. So that will give you the option to bring any of the forms that were in that previous screen into your workspace to edit them. So instead of backing out of here, pulling in another form, backing out again, pulling in another form, you can just grab them from the transaction, and you do that by hitting this plus sign here. Once you do that, it populates up here under your workspace, right? So we need that listing contract. We don't want this property disclosure. Seller estimated closing costs. We need that wire fraud. We need that affiliate business. This will just say it wasn't built before 78, so we don't have to worry about that. And then here, seller's property disclosure statement, e-sign, right? So we want to add that one into the transaction. And what happens here is that they then just populate under the form, right? So all of the other stuff that we added in here populates now into this form. You can move these around if you want, right? So if you want them to know their costs before they sign the listing agreement, you just populate that up. And these, so the transaction or the templates that Trisha created, she did put, somebody's not muted. Did anybody have a question? I heard somebody wasn't muted. Nope. Okay. All right. So Trisha did put these values in here as just a general basic value. So obviously she didn't know your list price, right? So when we're here on the statement for the seller's closing costs, you have to put the listing price, right? So we'll just go 400. And then you do have to fill out this. So it does say 6% plus 395, but we did put that transaction fee down here. So just keep that in mind. So this is going to be 24,000. That's 6% of 400. And then it just populates everything down here. And this would be your seller's proceeds. If you are trying to prorate the taxes and things of that nature, you don't know a closing date, so I would just caution you to be a little on the safe side with this, right? What I typically tell people is, hey, there is this section, but you'll get back whatever is in your escrow account, and taxes will be prorated at settlement. So usually if you do that and you're not adding anything in, this number will be slightly larger for your clients than what you are showing them, which nobody's ever going to be mad about. But if you try to prorate and say they're getting more back than they are and this number is less, probably not the best situation there. So anyway, moving these forms back and forth, you can do that. And then as you're scrolling down, you want to fill them out, right? So we're going to go ahead and just fill some stuff out. How do you find the rest of this information, right? You don't know what it is. How do you find it? You go to Bright and then you go to tax records. So we're going to toggle over. You're going to go over here to public record. So search public record. We're going to input it. You're going to go ahead and hit results. Click on that tax ID. Obviously, I just chose a price, but this is where you find all of the information that you're then going to input into the listing document, right? So you have your municipality here, you have that tax ID, you have the county, you have your tax amounts, you have your assessed amounts, you have square footage. This is also good information for inputting it into Bright, right, using the tax record. Just I'm going to go off on a little tangent here, but when you're inputting a listing into Bright, you always want to copy from public record. Do not copy somebody else's listing values over, because if they were incorrect in what they put in the MLS, you're now continuing to advertise incorrect things. So always copy from public record when you're inputting a listing. And it gives you your link.
Danielle.
Yep.
Hi, it's Kia. Hey,
Yeah.
what happens if the square footage is off on the public record?
So are you talking about situations like where there's a finished basement or something like that?
Right. Like, well, just in general, like I just had a situation where in the public record, it was say 1750 on the square footage, but they had an addition put on several years ago and it was never updated.
So that's a tricky question, because what you're advertising out, if you're adjusting that differently than public record, I would put some sort of caveat in there that says like it's buyers, it's up to the buyers to verify square footage or something like that, because you don't want to say this is the exact square footage, because then it's on you if it's incorrect, right? The best thing to do is to have your seller, I mean, if they permitted the addition or they permitted their finished basement, I think additions almost always are going to be permitted unless it's out somewhere that nobody's checking on it. But finished basements, unfortunately, people don't get permits very often, so that's not something that is going to show up in public record. And you can also select estimated when you're putting it in there as well. But they should have that updated. Like, they can contact the county or the municipality to have that updated. It's not a bad idea to do, just for future reference, but I understand that that's not going to happen immediately if you're listing a property. But just select estimated, and if you're going to say that there is X additional square footage, just put in the agent remarks, agent and buyer to verify square footage.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right, so this is where you're going to get all your info, like I said. Then you're going to come back over here and input all of that. I won't do all of it, just so that we can move through. But again, municipality, county, zoning was in there. School district was there as well. I just didn't point that out. Present use, currently occupied by, and then here's your tax ID. Starting date, I would always suggest not post dating this, just making a note on the last page if you're not listing it immediately, of a roundabout listing date, and or I've seen verbiage such as property will be active in the MLS within 48 hours of professional photography. So if you have a signed listing contract, you don't have any verbiage stating that it shouldn't be in the MLS, you're actually in violation if you're not putting it in the MLS. So just caveat on that. So in Trisha's templates, she does have this stuff already filled out for you. If you need to make any changes, make sure you're doing that. All of this is also filled out for you. So there's very little to do on the listing side. So this is something that you do have to check though, right? Broker will not use MLS, broker will use MLS. You can select these things as well. What's included, what's not included. So these are things that are not attached to the house, right? So your appliances are typically what we see here. If there's any fixtures or anything that the sellers are taking, for instance, there's a chandelier that's been in the family for 100 years in the dining room that makes the house look fantastic and you want to leave it there for showings, but they're taking it, you have to put that in excluded items. Otherwise it should stay. This is where you fill out that assessed info that you're getting and the taxes from the public records in Bright. If any of this stuff applies, the type of financing, and then down here in additional terms, this is where if you're not putting it in the MLS right away, you would put that note there saying that it'll be active on this date, or if you want to use the photography as a gauge for timeline, you can do that there. And if anything changes, your seller does have to go back and initial or sign. So say you wrote you know, property will go active August 1st, something happens, they can't make it active August 1st. You do want to make sure that you're updating and getting this signed or initialed accordingly. All right, so we're through that form. We're going to scroll down. So all of these others, right, are just forms that they pull in the name here. You're good to go. So sometimes people get confused here as well in terms of, well, where do my people sign? So we're not to that step yet. So your workspace, just think of it as where you edit the form. So the workspace is the area to edit. And then after that, our next step is signing. So this property disclosure, there's nothing on here for you to fill out. A little side note on this as well. So these blocks should all be filled out. So sometimes we see property disclosures where sellers only fill out the stuff that's actually like they know or that's applicable to them. Make sure you're telling them that if the answer is no, they're putting no. If it's unknown, they're putting unknown. And if it's not applicable, that they're also putting that. So we need a completed property disclosure form. All of these open boxes need to have a yes, no, unknown, or NA in them. And if you don't want to scroll through this because you're like, oh, I know that there's nothing that I do here on the property disclosure, you can just click back to a different form over here under your workspace and it'll take you to that specific form. Or if you're like, oh crap, I forgot to fill something out in the estimated costs, just click back over to that. All right, so once you have all of this stuff filled out, next is where we go to signing. So you hit top right, prepare signing. I use the Authentisign. That's what I suggest. Send to new Authentisign. Signing name. So this is how it's going to end up back in your transaction folder, and it'll also be the subject line that your sellers see when they are sent this the documents to sign, right? So we'll just go listing docs. Return folder, if you wanted to return them elsewhere, you could do that. It says optional, not necessary. So hit create. A little slow this morning. There we go. All right, and then next step here, add participants, right? So again, it was super important to add your parties to your transaction. So now you're going to add them from your transaction here. So seller 1, seller 2, and yourself, because you do have to sign some of those forms. Hit select. All right, and I always hit set signing order. So that means that it will go to the first person. Once they finish, it'll go to the next person. Once they finish, it'll go to the next. Otherwise, it can go to everybody at one time. I don't know why I have the preference that I do, but you should typically be signing last after your clients. So have them sign first, and then you just scroll through to make sure everything is where it belongs, right? So once you add them here into this transaction, they will populate everywhere that they're supposed to be, right? So they're on this form, their initials show up here, your initials show up on the listing contract as well, initials. And also one thing to note, so when it has this red around it with that asterisk, that means it's required. And don't turn that off because sometimes people will choose to skip things, but it does show as required. So you're good there. That's how it should pull in to always show. Initials good there, signatures. Technology is great. I'm telling you to scroll through because just make sure things are where they belong. They should all be there, but technology is great until it's not. So just make sure they're where they belong. This will take you like a couple of minutes just to scroll through and do. Right, they're good there. If you're a little OCD, you can pull the dates over to the date area. It's still valid if you don't. And then, so this is showing you that they'll be able to fill these things in, right? So it's showing you that you're sending them the correct form, right? Initials and dates at the bottom of all these pages. And then signatures down here. as well. So I would suggest talking to your sellers about this before. Some people like the paper copy. Some people like to be able to fill it out online. Whatever their preference is, I would choose that. Okay, so once you're here and once you're like, okay, everything is where it belongs, you come up here and hit next. And it's going to say that this expires. It always chooses about a month out. I think that's kind of silly. If people are expecting documents from you, they shouldn't need an entire month to sign them. So I usually give it 2 days. We'll go Wednesday. This is really lagging today. My apologies. And then you just go ahead and hit send. If you want to customize what you're saying to each person, this is something that I actually do when I send offers. I give them like a brief rundown and summarize everything we talked about that'll be in the offer and then the forms that they're signing. So if you want to customize the subject, like what, or not the subject, the body of the email to each of your clients, you can absolutely do that. So this is going to Jane Doe. If you wanted to write, hi, Jane, you know, these are the listing documents, blah, blah, blah. You can do that. Do the same thing for John. Obviously, you could do it for yourself, but it's not necessary. So once you do that, you hit save and then you hit send. And then they will get the email. So you set that signing order. I'm not going to send this. I'll show you what it comes back as once it's signed though. They'll get the emails to initial and sign. We're going to go back so that I can show you. Oh, all right. So once you have documents that are signed, I'll just click into here. So this is into a transaction, coming over to documents, and then this is what it'll show up as. So this was obviously a buyer packet, but same exact concept. So that one would have come back, you know, 32 West Keller, listing documents. You click on it, and here are all the forms that were signed. So you can open them up, download them, and submit them with your My Deals. There is a way to send this into that email address to the admins as well, but I would suggest downloading them and submitting them with My Deals. But this is how it comes back. Your sellers will also get a copy. They'll get an email with links to all the forms that they signed to download. So that is the process of sending a listing contract and getting signatures. Does anybody have any questions on anything I went over? Want me to go back into anything and show you how I did something?
Hey, Danielle.
Yeah. Hey, Jared.
You said hi. You said that there doesn't have to be an order for them to sign, right? Did you say that? In other words, all too often I'll have clients saying that they can't sign and won't let them sign because they're not next to sign.
Yeah, so that would be
Yeah.
the set signing order then. So if you toggle that over to set signing order, they won't even get the email until the person in front of them has signed. So that won't, it'll alleviate a lot of confusion. Yeah,
Like
signing order.
set signing order, and then there'll be a 1, 2, and a 3, or however many.
Yep.
Perfect. Thanks.
Sure. Anybody else have anything? Cool. Awesome. Well, we are 1 minute under a half hour. I figured we could keep it within that 30 minutes. So I did record this. I'll send it out for your reference. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. But hope you guys have a great Monday. Thanks for jumping on.